I trusted my only son and co-signed a $250,000 business loan. Months later, he vanished, off vacationing in Bali with his wife, while I was left bankrupt at 72. But I didn't beg. I fought back. My revenge? Brutal. The twist? Wrapped in a baby blanket. I always thought betrayal would come with a warning. A crack in the voice. A hesitation in the eyes. But it didn't. Not in my case. It came dressed in the smiles of people I loved the most. My only son David and his wife Sienna. My name is Eleanor James. I'm 72 years old, and until a year ago, I lived in a cozy single-story home in Boulder, Colorado. I taught English literature at the high school for 40 years. I loved my job, my students, the smell of old books, and the rhythm of the school calendar. When I finally retired, I had exactly $600,000 in my savings account, a pension I could rely on, and a home I had fully paid off. I thought I had done everything right. I was ready to enjoy the peace I had worked so hard for. I planted daisies in the front yard, joined a book club with old friends, and even considered taking a solo trip to Ireland, something Harold, my late husband, and I had always talked about but never got around to. I wasn't lonely, not really. My friend Janine lived just 5 blocks away, and we'd been best friends since the early 80s. She's the kind of friend who brings you soup when you're sick and never judges you when your house is a mess. I was content. I didn't need excitement. I certainly wasn't looking for drama. But that's the thing about life. It doesn't always ask permission. David and Sienna came to visit one sunny weekend in May. They brought flowers, wine, and a sparkle in their eyes I hadn't seen in a while. "Mom," David said over dinner, after Sienna had complimented my baked salmon 3 times too many, "we have something exciting to share." They had a plan. A business plan. Sienna did most of the talking. She always had a way with words, a sort of polished confidence that made you feel small and uninformed if you dared to question her. They wanted to open a luxury wellness spa in California. Yoga, detox treatments, organic skincare, the whole wellness lifestyle package, she said. "It's a booming industry, Mom," David added. "We've done all the market research. Sienna's Instagram has been gaining traction. We just need a little help getting started." That little help turned out to be a $250,000 business loan. I blinked. "You want me to give you the money?" No, David said quickly, shaking his head. "Just co-sign. The bank needs a guarantor to approve the loan. You wouldn't actually be paying anything. It's just a formality, really." "It's completely safe," Sienna chimed in. "We've got projections. We'll be profitable within the first year. It's the opportunity of a lifetime." I should have said no. I should have taken a day or 2 to think. I should have called Janine, who always has a sixth sense about these things. But I didn't. I looked at David, my only child. I remembered the boy who once begged me to attend every Little League game, who called me Mama longer than most boys his age. I remembered holding his hand at Harold's funeral, both of us lost in our grief. So I signed. It wasn't immediate. They left the papers with me for a few days, giving me time to review things, though David called every night to check in. And then one afternoon, I walked into the bank with those neatly stapled forms and signed my name as guarantor. They were thrilled, called me a lifesaver, hugged me so tightly I almost believed I'd done something wonderful. At first, there were updates. Excited phone calls from David, photos of the leased space, paint samples, even a video walkthrough that Sienna posted online, thanking her wonderful family for supporting her dream. Then the updates slowed. Then they stopped. I started calling, texting, leaving voicemails. "Hey, just checking in. How's the spa coming along? David, I haven't heard from you in weeks. Is everything okay?" Nothing. It was Janine who finally told me to call the bank. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, the same one David used to do his homework on, when I made the call. The representative pulled up the account and told me the spa had defaulted on the loan 3 months ago. Payments had stopped. And since I was the guarantor, the debt was now legally mine. $250,000. That number echoed in my ears like a siren. I asked the bank rep where David was. Had they spoken to him? Reached out. She hesitated. "We received notice they've moved out of the country." Bali. I sat in silence for hours that night. Janine came over, brought tea and tissues. I didn't cry. Not at first. I just sat there, thinking about how thoroughly I'd been fooled by the people I loved most. The foreclosure letters came next. Since I didn't have the cash to cover the loan, the bank placed a lien on my house. My beautiful little home with the daisy-lined yard. I sold it within weeks to avoid further fees and penalties. The sale covered the debt, and left me with barely enough to rent a small apartment across town. It felt like death. The death of trust. The death of a version of me that still believed in the goodness of people simply because they were family. But somewhere in that darkness, I found something unexpected. A kind of quiet anger. Not the rage that makes you break dishes or scream into pillows. No, this was something steadier. Colder. A decision forming like a storm cloud on the horizon. I wasn't going to disappear. I wasn't going to fade into silence and shame. They took my home. My security. My peace. They would not take my voice. So I opened my laptop, wiped the dust off the keyboard, and began to write. My name is Eleanor James, I typed. And this is how my son stole my future. I called the blog The Silent Ledger. It seemed fitting. A quiet record of things people never talk about. How the people we trust most can rob us blind with a smile. I had no plan beyond that first post. No idea if anyone would read it. But they did. They read and they wrote back. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. People like me. People who'd been tricked, used, abandoned by their children, siblings, even spouses. I wasn't alone. And that changed everything. The messages came in faster than I could read them. People from all over the country, some even from abroad, wrote to me after I published that first blog post. They weren't strangers anymore. They were my mirror. Stories spilled into my inbox like tears. Parents scammed by their children, retirees bankrupted by siblings, widows tricked by in-laws. The more I read, the less alone I felt. And the less alone I felt, the stronger I became. Janine noticed the shift in me first. "You're standing straighter," she said one morning as we drank coffee in my small but tidy apartment. I'd traded the home I once loved for a cramped second-floor unit overlooking a grocery store parking lot. The view wasn't much, but the space was mine. It was paid for. And somehow, that made it sacred. "I'm angry," I told her simply. And for the first time in my life, I'm letting that be okay. Anger had never sat easily with me. I was the quiet one, the agreeable one, the yes woman, the mother who forgave, the teacher who smoothed over the hurt so everyone else could keep learning. But now I saw the cost of that kind of silence. It was written in the foreclosure letters, the sleepless nights, and the tight line my mouth had become. I kept writing. Every week, a new post. I shared the story in pieces, the slow unraveling of trust, the guilt I felt for signing the loan, the shame of being deceived, the humiliation of selling my home. But I didn't just tell my story. I shared the stories of others too. With permission, I wrote about mothers tricked into signing over savings, grandmothers whose Social Security checks had been drained for someone else's shopping habits. And each post ended with a simple message: you are not foolish. You are not alone. You are not done. One night, about a month into this new chapter, I got an email from someone named Mark Rivera. I almost ignored it. There were so many messages I'd begun skimming just to keep up. But something about the subject line stopped me. "We need your voice, Eleanor." Mark was a journalist turned advocate. He ran a nonprofit in San Diego that helped victims of elder financial abuse. He'd read every post on my blog and wanted to feature me in a video series they were working on. "Your story," he wrote, "is what most people are too ashamed to say out loud. But your honesty could change lives." I hesitated. I was writing under my real name. Yes, but being filmed? That was different. It meant showing my face. It meant becoming the symbol of something I hadn't yet fully processed. But Janine, always wiser than I give her credit for, looked me in the eye and said, "You've already lost everything, Elle. Maybe now it's time to start building something." So I agreed. Mark flew out 2 weeks later and met me at a small cafe near the apartment. He was in his 30s, bright-eyed, with the calm, patient air of someone used to listening closely. He didn't rush me. We sat for hours, and I told him everything: Harold's death, my lonely retirement, the visit from David and Sienna, the loan, the silence, the bank, the foreclosure. When we finished, he said, "You've got a case." I blinked. "A case?" "You co-signed under false pretenses. If you can prove they never intended to pay the loan, that they left the country deliberately to avoid repayment, it's fraud. We can sue." I laughed, short and sharp. "Sue my own son?" He didn't flinch. "Eleanor, he didn't just borrow money. He lied. He used your love against you." That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought about every birthday party, every school play, every scraped knee I had tended to. Could I really take my only child to court? But the next morning, I opened my laptop, looked at the foreclosure notice still pinned to the screen, and I knew. This wasn't just about money. This was about dignity. About setting a line in the sand and finally saying, enough. With Janine's help, and thankfully her old law school connections, we assembled a legal team. We gathered emails, messages, loan documents, even screenshots of Sienna's social media posts bragging about their new life in paradise. It wasn't hard to build a timeline. They'd fled the same week the first loan payment was due. The case was filed under civil fraud and emotional distress. Mark's team helped with public awareness. The blog, once modest, now had over 100,000 subscribers. People began donating to a legal fund I hadn't even set up myself. It was overwhelming. Strangers were sending money, encouragement, letters of support. I was no longer just a victim. I was becoming something else. A voice. A warning. A survivor. When the court date came, David didn't show. He sent a lawyer instead, who tried to dismiss everything as a misunderstanding. Family matters, he called it. But the judge saw through it. The case dragged on for months. It was exhausting emotionally and mentally, but I stayed steady. I went to every hearing. Spoke when needed. I even testified under oath about the moment I realized my son had never planned to pay back a dime. When the judgment came, I was awarded $400,000 in damages. People asked me what I planned to do with the money. Take a trip? Buy a new home? Maybe even forgive David? But I didn't want any of it. I knew what I had to do. Every cent was donated to senior advocacy centers, shelters for older adults who had nowhere else to go, financial literacy programs for retirees. I kept none of it. That wasn't my victory. My victory was in having the power to choose where the money went, and in refusing to let it define me. I never heard from David after the trial. He didn't write. He didn't call. But one day, a thin envelope arrived from Sienna. No return address. Just a card. It said simply, "We didn't think you'd fight back." I smiled. Then I burned it. The blog kept growing. Readers shared their stories, their pain, their triumphs. A woman in Ohio saved her home after reading my post about loan guarantees. A couple in Arizona rewrote their wills to protect themselves from manipulative relatives. The ripple effect was real. Mark convinced me to write a book. The Silent Ledger. How I Lost Everything and Found My Voice. It was part memoir, part guide. I didn't expect much, but it became a quiet hit, especially among book clubs and retirement communities. People read it, cried with me, and passed it along to friends. Sometimes they asked, "Do you regret it?" And I always said, "No," because losing money hurts. But losing yourself? That's the real tragedy. And I wasn't willing to let that happen again. What they took from me wasn't just financial. It was the illusion that family means safety. What I gained in return was far more valuable. Truth, purpose, and a community I never knew existed. But the story wasn't over. Not yet. Something unexpected was still on the horizon. Something that would challenge everything I thought I'd already overcome. And it would start, as so many things do, with a letter. I didn't expect the letter. It arrived on a dull Tuesday, slipped between a grocery store coupon booklet and a political flyer. I almost threw it out without opening it. But something about the handwriting stopped me. I hadn't seen it in years, but I recognized it immediately, rounded, deliberate, slightly slanted forward, like it was always trying to get somewhere fast. It was David's handwriting. I stood in my little kitchen, my hands trembling, just staring at it. After everything, the silence, the betrayal, the lawsuit, I hadn't heard a single word from him. And now here it was. A white envelope with my name on it in the hand of the son who once called me Mommy and begged me to read Goodnight Moon twice every night. I made tea before I opened it, as if somehow the warmth would protect me from whatever was inside. It didn't. The letter was short. No apology, no real explanation. Just a few tight sentences. "I'm sorry things turned out this way. I didn't think you'd take it that far. You made your point. I hope you're happy now." That was it. No mention of the lies. No acknowledgement of the damage done. Just bitterness wrapped in cowardice. Like I had wronged him somehow, by not staying silent. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer I almost never open. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because some things shouldn't be destroyed right away. Sometimes they need to sit for a while, quiet and unimportant, until you're ready to forget they ever mattered. That same week, I got a call from Mark. He was working on a new video project highlighting seniors who had turned their financial trauma into advocacy. He wanted me to be a part of it again, maybe travel to a few cities, speak at community centers, share my story in person. I hesitated. I liked the safety of my little apartment, the comfort of routine. But then I remembered that woman in Ohio who had written me saying, "Because of your story, I kept my house." So I said yes. We started in Phoenix. I stood in front of 70 retirees in a library auditorium and told them what had happened to me. The nerves didn't last long. People nodded, cried, some even clapped when I said, "Family is love, not leverage." In the audience, an older man stood up during Q&A and said, "My daughter forged my signature on a credit card application. I didn't tell anyone. I was embarrassed. But you made me realize it wasn't my fault." It hit me then, this was bigger than me. This wasn't just about Eleanor James from Boulder, Colorado. This was about 1,000 quiet betrayals that happen every day behind closed doors. And people needed to hear it said out loud. It's not your fault. And you're not weak for loving someone who hurt you. After the talk, a woman named Lena approached me. Early 60s, white hair in a braid, eyes sharp as tacks. She handed me a business card. "I run a shelter for seniors in Santa Fe. People don't think older folks get abused, but they do. Financially, emotionally, even physically. I've got 12 women right now with stories worse than yours, if you can believe it. You should come visit sometime." I took the card, thanked her, and slipped it into my purse. I didn't know then how important that shelter would become to me. Not yet. Back in Boulder, I kept writing. The blog had grown so large it was now its own little ecosystem. We'd added guest posts, advice columns, legal tips. Janine called it my second career, though it didn't pay in anything but gratitude. And honestly, that was enough. But even as the blog flourished and my days filled with new purpose, a quiet part of me still ached. Not for David, not really, but for the version of motherhood I thought I'd had. The one where love was enough. Where raising someone with care and devotion guaranteed they'd treat you with the same. I had to learn that wasn't always true. Then came the email from Rita, a literary agent in New York. She'd read the blog, loved my voice, and wanted to talk about a book. I laughed when I first read it, thinking it was some scam. But Rita wasn't a scam. She was serious, and kind, and persistent. Over weekly calls, we put together a proposal. The book wouldn't just be my story, it would be a guide, a warning, a companion for anyone who'd walked through fire and come out scarred but standing. We called it The Silent Ledger, same as the blog. When it was published, I expected it to quietly disappear like so many personal memoirs do. But it didn't. It caught on, slowly at first, then with surprising force. Libraries requested copies. Support groups adopted it as a reading tool. I started getting invitations to speak at book clubs, churches, senior centers. I went. Not because I enjoyed the spotlight. Honestly, I never have, but because every time I spoke, someone came up afterward and said, "Me too." And I always hugged them and whispered, "I know." One night, back in my apartment, I sat reading an early review of the book when my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer anyway. "Hello." There was silence for a moment. Then a woman's voice, quiet and unsure. "Is this Eleanor James?" "Yes." My name is Lena Morales from the Santa Fe shelter. You spoke with me after your talk in Phoenix a few months ago." I sat up straighter. "Yes, of course. I remember. I hate to call like this, but we have a woman here. Her name is Shirley, 78 years old. Her son emptied her accounts, left her without housing. She's sleeping in one of our temporary beds, but we're at capacity, and she keeps mentioning your name." "My name?" "She read your blog. She said it gave her hope. Said she wanted to meet the woman who reminded her she wasn't alone." I didn't answer right away. I looked out my window at the streetlight blinking below. The kind of quiet darkness that once felt like loneliness but now felt like space, room to grow. "I'll come," I said. "You will?" Lena sounded surprised. "I've been where she is," I said. "And someone showed up for me when I needed it. It's my turn now." I didn't know it yet, but that trip to Santa Fe would change the course of everything. It would open new doors, spark new beginnings, and plant the seeds for a legacy I never expected to leave. But all I knew then was that an old woman needed to be reminded she still mattered. And I was going to be the one to tell her. I arrived in Santa Fe on a Friday afternoon, the sun hanging low, washing everything in a golden hue that made the red dust sparkle. I hadn't traveled much since the move, but the quiet hum of the train and the wide desert sky gave me a strange kind of peace. As I stepped out of the station, Lena was waiting in her old blue truck, waving like we'd known each other for years. She had the kind of face that told you she didn't tolerate nonsense, but would make soup for a stranger without being asked. She drove us straight to the shelter, a modest one-story building tucked between a gas station and a church. It wasn't fancy, peeling paint, cracked windows, but it was clean, and it buzzed with something warm. Life maybe. Or dignity. You can feel that in the air, even if the walls are thin. Shirley was sitting on the porch when we pulled in. She looked even older than 78, with brittle white hair pulled back into a messy bun and hands that trembled as she clutched a paper cup. Her eyes, though, they were alert. Sad but sharp. She stood when she saw me, and I saw it happen in real time. Disbelief first, then recognition, and then something else entirely. Relief. "You really came," she whispered. "I told Lena I would. I thought maybe it was just something people say," she said, her voice cracking. I reached out and took her hand. It was ice cold despite the sun. Well, I used to be one of those people who said things and never followed through. I'm not that woman anymore. Inside, the shelter was small but well organized. Bunk beds lined 2 of the rooms, and a narrow kitchen in the back smelled of tomato soup and rosemary. There were only a few women staying there, some with bruises, some with hollow cheeks, all carrying pain like a second skin. Shirley led me to a quiet corner and started talking. Her story was familiar, painfully so. My son, Kevin, he came to live with me after his divorce. Said he needed time to get back on his feet. I gave him a room, paid for his groceries, even let him use my car. Then one day I went to buy groceries and my debit card was declined. Everything gone. He'd drained both accounts. The house. He'd already signed some kind of refinance paperwork behind my back. Forged my name. I squeezed her hand. "You don't have to explain how it happened. I already know." We sat in silence for a while after that. Just breathing. Sometimes that's the kind of company you need. Someone who doesn't try to fix it, someone who just gets it. That night I stayed in the guest room. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Shirley, about the other women in that shelter. I thought about how lucky I'd been to have Janine and Mark, and a voice people somehow decided to listen to. But what about the ones like Shirley, the ones whose stories never got told? In the morning, Lena and I drank coffee on the back porch while the sun rose over the hills. "You've got a look," she said. "What kind of look?" "The kind people get when they've made up their mind." I smiled. "You ever think about expanding this place?" She raised an eyebrow. "All the time. We get calls every week from people we can't take in. I've got a list longer than a CVS receipt." "What would it take?" "Money. Space. People who give a damn." "Well," I said, "I have some of those things. And I know how to find the rest." I spent the next few weeks back in Boulder making calls, writing proposals, and calling in every favor I had. I didn't have David's money anymore, what I gave to the organizations after the lawsuit was gone. But the book was still selling. The blog had steady ad revenue. And, more importantly, people were listening. Mark introduced me to a few sponsors. Janine helped with the legal paperwork. I wrote a long post on the silent ledger titled, "What Comes After Survival?" and laid out our goal. A second location for the shelter, right in Santa Fe, with space for 20 residents, including medical support and legal services. We raised $140,000 in 8 weeks. When I returned to Santa Fe to break ground on the new location, Shirley was the first to greet me. "You did it," she said, teary-eyed. "No," I corrected gently. "We did." She stayed at the shelter another few months while her identity theft case wound through the courts. Lena helped her find a pro bono lawyer, and I connected her with a financial coach through the nonprofit I'd been supporting. She eventually moved into a small condo paid for with a settlement from her lawsuit. Her son never contacted her again. She said that was the best part. I spoke at the ribbon cutting for the new shelter. My speech was simple. I looked out at the crowd, survivors, staff, donors, and said, "This isn't just a building. It's a door. A door that opens when everyone else has slammed theirs shut. A door that doesn't ask what you've lost, but what you want to rebuild." And for once I felt like everything I had gone through, the pain, the betrayal, the loss, had a purpose. But just as things were starting to feel settled, just as I began to believe this chapter of my life had closed, something unexpected arrived. Again, in the form of a letter. This time it wasn't from David. The handwriting was unfamiliar. More careful. Neat. Inside was a sonogram. And a note. "I thought you should know. Her name will be Margaret. After Grandma. Sienna." I stared at it for a long time. A little white square with a gray blur of life on it. My grandchild. A girl. A new beginning. I didn't know how to feel. Joy. Anger. Hope. None of it made sense. I held the image like it might dissolve if I blinked too hard. The woman who had betrayed me now carried the future I never thought I'd see. A part of me wanted to throw it away. But another part, quiet and stubborn, whispered, "Wait." I folded the sonogram gently, placed it in a new drawer. Not the one with David's letter. A different one. This one still had room for hope. I didn't respond. Not yet. Some wounds need time before they can heal. And some stories, they're not done writing themselves. It's strange how something so small, just a smudge of shadow on a medical printout, can shift the entire ground beneath your feet. I stared at that sonogram for days, unable to decide whether it was a threat or a gift. Margaret, my granddaughter. A name I hadn't heard since my own mother passed away decades ago. Sienna hadn't chosen it by accident. That much I was sure of. I didn't talk about it with anyone, not even Janine. She would have called it manipulation. Maybe she would have been right. But part of me couldn't stop thinking about the baby. Not David or Sienna, or the mess they left in their wake. Just the baby. A child who hadn't asked for any of this. For weeks I kept busy. The new Santa Fe shelter had opened, and we were already making plans for workshops and legal clinics. I spent my days helping women navigate financial paperwork, coaching them on how to talk to lawyers, and sitting beside them during long phone calls with banks that had treated them like problems to be erased. It filled something in me that I hadn't known was still empty. Purpose. Not borrowed purpose like I used to find in being a mother, or a wife, or even a teacher, but my own. Self-made. Unshakable. Then, one night in early spring, the phone rang. The number was local to Boulder. I let it ring once, twice. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but something in my chest said, answer. So I did. Hello. A shaky breath on the other end. Then a voice I hadn't heard in nearly a year. Mom. It's me. David. My breath caught, but I didn't say anything. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, he continued, his voice strained, older somehow. But I didn't know she was going to write you. I didn't ask her to. She thought you'd want to know. I stayed silent. We're having a baby. And I know I don't deserve anything from you. Not after what I did. Well, we did. But I swear to you, Mom, I've changed. You fled the country, David. I said finally. My voice sounded even, too calm for the anger that still bubbled somewhere underneath. You left me with a $250,000 debt and a house I had to sell. I know, he said quickly. I know. I was stupid. I thought we'd pay it back, honestly. I believed the business would work. But when it didn't, I panicked. We both did. I reached out. I called. I begged you to explain. And you vanished. There was a pause on his end. I imagined him sitting somewhere, maybe in a room filled with baby furniture and tiny clothes. Did he even feel shame? Or was this all about guilt now that he needed something again? I'm not asking you for anything, he said. I just wanted you to know. And maybe if you wanted, one day you could meet her. Meet Margaret. The name hit me again like a stone thrown through glass. I didn't reply. I ended the call without saying goodbye. I sat in the dark for a long time after that. Mr. Dorian, my cat, jumped up beside me and curled into a warm loaf, purring like he could sense something had shifted. I didn't cry. I'd run out of tears a long time ago. But I did feel something I hadn't in months. Uncertainty. Was I closing the door on a mistake, or on a chance to heal? Janine came over the next morning and found me on the porch, staring into my untouched cup of coffee. Trouble sleeping? She asked, sitting beside me. They called. Her eyebrows lifted. Both of them. Just David. He said they're having a baby. A girl. Named Margaret. Janine sighed. They always know where to hit you. I know. What do you want to do? I shook my head. I don't know. I thought I'd made peace with losing him. With losing them both. But this baby, she didn't betray me. She didn't lie or steal or disappear. No, Janine said, wrapping her hand over mine. But she's theirs. And that means any road to her goes through them. I didn't reply. Not then. Over the next few weeks, I kept working. I traveled to Denver for a panel discussion on elder financial abuse. I helped a woman in her 60s file her first police report against her adult son. I launched a new section on the silent ledger dedicated to grandchildren raised by the very people who had once betrayed their own parents. And then one afternoon, while sorting mail, I found another envelope. This time from Sienna. Inside was a picture. Not a sonogram. A real photograph. A newborn swaddled in a soft pink blanket, her tiny eyes barely open. Underneath, a note in surprisingly neat handwriting. Born April 3rd, 6 pounds 4 ounces. She's healthy. And I swear to you, I will never let her hurt you the way we did. But if you never want to hear from us again, I will understand. No demands. No requests. Just a picture and an offering of silence. I didn't respond right away. I let the photo sit on my mantel, next to a candle I kept lit for Harold. I talked to it sometimes. Told it about my day, about the garden starting to bloom, about Shirley's new job at the senior center in Santa Fe. I told it about the fear that lived behind my ribs like a stubborn tenant. Fear that this baby, this Margaret, would become another connection I'd pour my heart into, only to be disappointed again. But then I remembered something from one of my blog readers, a woman named Joan who had written me after losing her house and her savings. She said, "Forgiveness isn't a favor you give the person who hurt you. It's the freedom you give yourself." So I wrote back. Just one line. "If you want to introduce her to me someday, I will listen. Nothing more. Nothing less." A week later, my phone rang again. "Mom." It was David. "We'd like to visit." No pressure. Just a visit. I didn't say yes right away. But I didn't say no either. We picked a Saturday. I baked lemon muffins, not carrot cake, never again. I cleaned the apartment and put out fresh flowers. When they arrived, Margaret in her carrier, I held my breath. Sienna looked tired but softer. David kept his eyes low. But the baby, oh, that baby, she was beautiful. Wispy dark hair, tiny fingers that curled around mine like they knew me. I didn't ask for explanations. I didn't open old wounds. I just held her. And for a brief moment, the noise in my head went still. They didn't stay long. Just an hour. They thanked me, promised nothing, and left. After they were gone, I sat on the porch again. Same chair. Same silence. But something felt different. Not healed. Not fixed. Just different. Sometimes the past doesn't get a tidy ending. Sometimes it leaves a mark you learn to live around. But sometimes, if you're lucky, it offers a crack of light. And I was ready to see where it might lead. The first time I held Margaret, something in me cracked open, a place I didn't realize had hardened. She was so light in my arms, warm and smelling like milk and baby powder. She blinked at me with those big eyes, her little mouth forming an O before yawning. That moment, brief as it was, lodged itself deep inside my chest like a splinter of hope. They stayed just long enough for coffee and the lemon muffins I'd made. David paced more than he sat, awkward and jittery, as if expecting me to yell or fall apart. Sienna, surprisingly quiet, barely spoke unless I asked her a direct question. But I didn't care. I wasn't watching them. I was watching her, the baby, the start of something new. After they left, I sat with Mr. Dorian and watched the shadows grow long across the carpet. I thought about the women at the shelter in Santa Fe. About Shirley. About how many of us had poured our hearts, our savings, our faith into family and been left with nothing but silence. And here I was holding silence again, but this time a gentler one. A beginning, not an end. A few weeks passed. Then another call came. Sienna this time. Would you like to come to her christening?" she asked. I blinked. "Excuse me. It's just a small thing. At our local church. A few friends. David's parents. Nothing grand. We'd like you there. If you want to be." My first instinct was to decline. My stomach twisted at the idea of being around the same people who had stood silent through the worst of it, or worse, enabled it. But I kept hearing that whisper in the back of my mind, the one that said, "This isn't for them. It's for her." So I said yes. I wore my best navy dress, and a string of pearls Harold had given me for our 25th anniversary. I didn't go to impress anyone. I went to feel solid in my own skin. The church was small, wooden pews and stained glass windows, the kind of place that smelled like candle wax and hymnals. Margaret was in a white gown, her tiny hands swaddled, a lace bonnet tied under her chin. Sienna handed her to me before the ceremony began. "She's been fussy all morning," she said, almost apologetic. I took her gently, whispering nonsense, bouncing her slowly. She calmed almost immediately. "Still got the touch," I murmured. Sienna smiled, and for the first time it looked real. The christening was uneventful, sweet, quiet. I didn't stay for the reception afterward. I left as soon as they stepped into the church hall, politely excusing myself. I wasn't ready for mingling, for explaining who I was or pretending that things were fine. Later that evening, as I peeled off my dress and let down my hair, I found a folded note tucked into my purse. Just 3 lines. "Thank you for showing up. I know it isn't easy, but she'll know who you are. S." I stared at that note for a long time, my fingers curled around it as tightly as I once clung to baby David's hand crossing the street. More visits followed. Short ones. Controlled. They'd come over with Margaret for tea. Sometimes I'd meet them at a park. We didn't talk much about the past, though once, when Margaret had fallen asleep on my chest, David quietly said, "I was scared. That's why I ran." I looked at him, really looked at him. Scared people face their mistakes. They don't bury them in paradise. He didn't argue. He just nodded. And I let that be enough for now. Meanwhile, the silent ledger continued to grow. Our community had become more than a blog. It was a network. We launched a podcast hosted by Mark, interviewing victims, lawyers, social workers. I recorded 3 episodes with him, each one covering a different chapter of my journey. They were raw and honest and exhausting, but people needed to hear it. We also created a toolkit for older adults. How to spot financial red flags, how to legally protect assets, how to say no without guilt. We translated it into Spanish and Mandarin, mailed it to libraries, churches, and senior centers across the country. One afternoon, I got a call from a high school teacher in Vermont. She was using the silent ledger in her senior ethics class. She said, "These kids, they think their parents will always say yes. You're helping them see that love comes with limits." It made me weep quietly and unexpectedly into a dish towel. But for all the growth, the good, the steps forward, I still had moments of doubt. Moments when I wondered if reconnecting with David and Sienna was a mistake. That doubt became sharp one Saturday in June. I was at the local farmer's market, picking up strawberries, when I spotted Sienna by the flower stand. She didn't see me. She was on her phone, face pinched, voice tight. "I told you I can't ask her." "Not again. We're not doing that. Just leave it alone." My chest went cold. "Not again." I stepped back, moved behind a stall, waited until she left. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask questions. But I watched carefully after that. I guarded my words. I didn't give more than I could afford to lose. The calls and visits kept coming, but now I saw them with new eyes. Were they real or just rehearsed? Was Margaret the bridge between us or a pawn? Then came the letter from my bank. A request to confirm I was willing to act as a guarantor on a small home renovation loan for David and Sienna. My stomach turned. I hadn't agreed to anything. I called the bank. They said the application was submitted, listing me as a secondary signer, but the signature didn't match. Forgery. Again. I sat at my desk, hands cold, heart pounding in disbelief. After all the pain, after all the rebuilding, had they truly learned nothing? I called Janine. Told her everything. "Do you want to press charges?" she asked. "No," I said. "Not yet." Instead, I called David. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Hey, Mom." "We need to talk," I said. "Now." "In person." We met at my apartment. I opened the door, stepped aside, and waited. "I got a letter from the bank," I said calmly. "They said I co-signed something. But I didn't." David didn't deny it. He just sagged into a chair, hands over his face. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," he mumbled. "Sienna, she thought maybe if we just got the approval, you'd say yes later. She forged my name." He nodded. "I don't know what else to say," he whispered. "We're drowning. The baby, the bills." "You had a choice," I said, voice shaking. "You could have come to me honestly. But instead, you did the very thing that nearly destroyed me." "I'm sorry." "I know," I said. "But I won't let it happen again." That night, I revoked all power of attorney, froze my credit, alerted the bank. I updated my will, again. This time more detailed, more protected. The trust for Margaret remained. But everything else, the house, the royalties, the savings, would go to shelters, to programs, to women who truly needed it. I didn't cut them out entirely. But I built walls. Tall ones. They visited less after that. Short calls. Polite texts. The bridge had cracked. Maybe beyond repair. But Margaret? She still reached for me every time she saw me. And I still reached back. By the time autumn rolled in, the leaves outside my apartment turned to gold. My blueberry bush, the one I planted after the court case, had finally borne fruit, small, sweet, and stubborn. I picked them carefully one morning and thought about how much life is like that. Sometimes the things we plant in the middle of loss don't show up until long after we've stopped expecting them to. Margaret had just turned 1. I got a card in the mail, a photo of her with cake on her cheeks, giggling in a high chair, the word 1 spelled out behind her in balloons. Inside, in Sienna's handwriting, was a short message. "Thank you for loving her the way you do. I know we don't deserve your trust, but we're grateful you still see her with clear eyes." It was the first time either of them had acknowledged what they'd broken without trying to smooth it over. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Some messages are best answered by actions, not words. The shelter in Santa Fe was thriving. Shirley now ran day-to-day operations there, and watching her move from a frightened, betrayed woman into a leader warmed something deep in me. We had opened 2 more resource centers by then, one in Oregon, one in Ohio, and both were full within weeks. The need was staggering. The stories never stopped coming. But now, when they came, we had somewhere to send people. Somewhere safe. Somewhere real. The silent ledger had become a movement. We partnered with legal aid societies. Launched an online workshop series. A young woman named Priya, whose mother had been manipulated into signing over her pension, joined as our project director. She brought fire to the team, and I saw in her the kind of resilience I wished I'd found sooner in myself. That fall, I was invited to speak at a national conference on elder justice in Washington, D.C. It was the kind of formal event I used to avoid: stages, microphones, people in suits. But this time I said yes. I stood at the podium in front of rows of lawyers, advocates, social workers, and policymakers. And I told them my story. All of it. Not the polished version. Not the headlines. The real story. The shame, the silence, the hope that somehow love would fix what was broken. I gave everything to people who saw me as a safety net, I said, my voice steady. Not a person. Not a mother. Just a means to an end. And when I stopped being useful, I stopped being seen. But I didn't disappear. I fought back. And now I stand here because fighting back isn't just a right. It's a responsibility. For all of us. The applause was quiet at first, then grew. People stood. Some cried. I didn't. Not until I was backstage, and a young man barely out of college came up to me and said, "I'm going home this weekend. To talk to my grandmother. To say thank you. And to make sure she's safe." That was the moment I understood. My story wasn't just about what I'd lost. It was about what others might still save. David called that evening. Just once. I let it go to voicemail. "Hey, Mom. I watched your speech. I know it probably wasn't easy to say all that out loud. But you did it. And I'm sorry. Again. For everything. I don't know if we'll ever have a real relationship again. But I wanted you to know I see it now. I really see it." I didn't call back. Some things don't need reopening. Some doors are better left half shut with quiet dignity. But I didn't hate him anymore. Hate takes energy I could use better elsewhere. That winter, I hosted Thanksgiving at my apartment for the first time in years. Janine came, of course, bringing her famous sweet potato pie. Shirley drove up from Santa Fe with 2 new residents in tow who had nowhere else to go. Priya brought her mother, who barely spoke but cried through most of dinner just from being welcomed. We sat around my little table, laughter rising like steam off the mashed potatoes. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like something was missing. The empty space at the table wasn't hollow, it was simply space. Space for new things. New people. New joy. After everyone left, I washed dishes slowly, listening to the soft jazz station on my little kitchen radio. Mr. Dorian weaved between my feet, purring. Outside, snow had started to fall. Soft. Quiet. Steady. I walked to the bookshelf where I kept family photos. I'd rearranged them over the past year. The ones with just Harold and me now stood beside pictures from the shelter, snapshots of Shirley holding babies, Priya speaking at a conference, Janine and me holding garden shears with blueberry juice on our fingers. And there, in the center, one picture of Margaret. Just her. Not with David. Not with Sienna. Just the baby. Bright-eyed. Smiling. I'd created a trust in her name. A fund she could only access when she turned 18. A clause in the paperwork stated that the money couldn't be touched by either of her parents. It wasn't revenge. It was protection. A shield around the only part of my past I was still willing to carry forward. Sometimes people ask me if I ever forgave David and Sienna. I usually tell them the truth. I forgave the part of them that was afraid. But I never forgot the part of them that was willing to let me drown. There's a difference. In late December, I got a package in the mail. No return address, but I knew. Inside was a hand-drawn card. Crayon scribbles. Stickers. A messy attempt at writing her name. Margaret. It wasn't much. But it was something. A start. I pinned it to the corkboard above my desk, next to a note from a woman in Kansas who said our toolkit saved her from signing over her retirement account to her grandson. It's funny how these little scraps, paper, ink, effort, can rebuild something stronger than glass or wood. I wake up every day with purpose now. Some days it's big, meetings, speeches, planning new centers. Other days it's small, watering the plants, feeding Mr. Dorian, writing one post on the blog. But all of it matters. All of it is mine. And that's the most important thing I've learned through this whole journey. What's yours is not always what you were born into. Sometimes it's what you build out of the wreckage. The garden that grows from the storm. The home you make in yourself when the old one is gone. I'm 79 years old now. I'm not the woman I was when David asked me to co-sign that loan. I'm not even the woman who stood outside a shelter in Santa Fe, trying to remember how to breathe. I'm someone else entirely. Someone stronger. Clearer. Fiercer, maybe. And free. Truly, finally free. And in that freedom, I found something better than forgiveness or revenge. I found myself. The ledger isn't silent anymore. It sings.